everybody. Thanks for joining us for Holiday Baubles. I hope everybody finds it informative at least. I want to make sure that you feel very, very secure about how you're going to put these things together when you've got all the strips made. That's really the only tricky part of this. Getting them made is not going to be, I don't think you're going to find it's too difficult. So let's just take a look at the little items themselves. They come in 3 sizes in the package. And I do want to recognize this is a copyrighted design. It's made by Kristen Poor of Poorhouse Designs. And so she has gone to all the work to sort of engineer the sizes and shapes and pieces that we need. So I won't be mentioning any actual measurements of the pieces. I just want to be able to give you some tips and tricks on how you're going to put it together. So this is the medium size. The big size is, gosh, a good 6 inches, all right? And you can see that there's plenty of room. If you wanted to make this like a mistletoe ball to hang from your ceiling for a Christmas celebration or whatever. So large, medium, and then here's the little, learn your camera. There's the little size. It's about 3 inches or so. They can be done in different colors, but the one thing you'll notice about all of them is they have what's called a main fabric and an accent fabric. And in this case, the main fabric is this print with all of these, let me get this on here, with all of these little Christmas balls on it, the print. And then the accent is the little check, gold and white, all right? We'll just show another version of it on this particular one, the Halloween one. The main print is the scary eyes, and the accent print is the stripe. This was a fun one to make. It glows in the dark, and I can't show that to you because we can't turn the lights all off, but it really did turn out quite good, and those little eyes stare at you from the dark. So to begin with, when you get your pattern, all right, called Holiday Baubles, it's going to ask you to begin by cutting out all of these pieces. And the back does give measurements for the amounts that you're going to want to buy, but she's kind of listed it kind of as if you were going to be buying fat quarters and things like that. So at the end, I will give you measurements that you can use to check your stash to see if you want to make any of them just from stash fabric. I'll give you just inches, measurements in inches about yard goods with the fabric that you can buy. I'm going to switch it to the document camera now and start showing you some of the things that I want to draw to your attention. So the first thing is when they ask you, I'm just bringing this slowly over, I hope nobody gets sick. They ask you to cut out some pieces, and I find it actually a lot easier if you begin by cutting your templates. And boy, do we need focus. There we go. So I would recommend that you just take some template plastic and copying the 3 shapes that she gives you on the inside of the pattern in the back of the cupboard. Copy those pieces that you're going to be using to cut the accent fabric. So the large, the medium, and the small. You're going to need them 12 times, and it gets a little bit of a drag laying the fusible web over that piece. So just make your templates right away. On that note, just going to push these to the side. On that note, when you decide what is going to be the main fabric and the accent fabric, you want to be careful about the layout of that accent fabric. In my example of the Halloween fabrics, you'll notice here the Halloween fabrics have a very definite vertical stripe, or the eyes one has a definite vertical stripe going behind it. So I wanted that to be consistent in my bauble on my accent pieces. So when I cut my template pieces and traced them, I made sure that they were all facing in the same direction. The same thing for my stripes. I wanted the stripes to always be going up and down. I'll just show that to you on the bauble. So I always wanted the stripes coming from the outside and going in. So I made a point of laying the fusible web out on the fabric like that. For fusible web, I used Wonder Under. I just like how light it is, how quick and easy it is to use, and the fact that the paper side is really, really easy to draw on. So I have no trouble with that. A little hint you could use for yourself, since you're going to have to trace around 12 of these shapes, these half moon shapes, I just begin by drawing a line with my quilting ruler and a pencil, and then I line my templates up on that. And then when you're getting ready to cut, you can just lay that on your cutting board and you can cut those 4 bottom pieces right away. Zoom, those are cut, and it speeds up the process just a little bit. When I want to fussy cut with the fusible web, then what I do is I trace, I don't know if you can see that, I trace my shape on the fusible web, but cut it out just a little bit bigger, so that, say I wanted to fussy cut one of these little eyes, and I wanted to get, say, these blue ones here. When I lay that in whatever direction I'm going to lay it on, because it'll just be sort of random now, then I can fuse that on and I can cut it out according to the exact shape. I haven't wasted a lot of my extraneous fabric there, but it does mean that my fusible web has reached all the way to the very edge where I want it to fuse down. So I recommend you don't cut out the exact shape before you begin. Just cut it out with a little bit of extra space around it for the fusing. So that's just a couple of considerations to look at when you're getting ready to cut your pieces. The pattern will give you very, very clear instructions for the small, medium, and large sizes. So for each one of the baubles, you'll need 3 pieces of fabric cut to a specific size. You will need 12 of the accent pieces cut with their applique material on the back. So you could use Wonder Under, you could use Steam-A-Seam, you can use the Heat and Bond Light, any of those that you can use that you can sew through effectively with your sewing machine after, that don't gum up your needle, are all usable pieces. So 3 strips, 12 accent pieces, and then they recommend the Decor Bond as one of their products, and she also recommends another one too. She uses Durafuse by Baubles or Decor Bond, so we have Decor Bond in the store. And each strip will have 2 pieces of Decor Bond cut to a very specific size. Don't cut down on that. Make sure you do use them. You need that for the structure of this. When you go to pinch these and get them into position, you need that to be really, really secure in behind there. So we have our pieces cut, 6 pieces of the support fabric, 12 of the accent pieces, and 3 of the main pieces. All right, I'm just going to move this. All right, so I'm just moving on to using the bigger pieces here. This is the size large that was pictured. I just showed you the pieces, how they would look if it was the size small. So once you've got your pieces cut to the exact size, we need to know where to locate these accent pieces. So our main piece is cut, our accent piece is ready to go on, and the designer of the pattern will have you mark the center of that strip. So it's just a quick and easy matter of folding that over, finding that center, and just giving it a little bit of a press. And don't worry about creating a crease there. If you think you're worried that it might show up on your finished product, it's actually not going to. And you're going to be doing plenty of pressing on this piece by the time it's done anyways, and so it's not a worry. Then she has you measure a specific distance from that center fold out to the outside here. And I don't know if you can see, but I have marked mine. Oh man, I thought orange would really show up. I have marked mine in orange markings. I stayed within the first ½ inch from the edge. Not that it would matter, because my accent pieces are going to cover that over anyways, but I just wanted to be able to make sure that I could see it really easily. So she will give you a chart with a specific distance from the center to the outside. And I find it handy to just take my ruler, mark that marking with a piece of tape. And in this case, I just arbitrarily chose 2 1/8. It isn't for this one, but I don't want to give away any of her copyrighted information. So in the case of needing 2 1/8, if you just marked your ruler with that, then you could just quickly do a visual, put that on the fold, and make a quick mark right at the end, and quickly get all of those marks that you needed to put onto that piece. So it's just a little easy way to use your ruler. 4 markings, 3 pieces makes 12 accent pieces that have to go on, 4 on each. So then her instructions say to take the accent piece, fold it in half, and just crease it a little bit so that you can see that crease, because ultimately you're matching that center crease to that marking you just made. And once it's laid on, you're going to be pressing that in place. I find that getting this fusible web paper off doesn't always behave as nicely as it just did for me right now. So what I will do is I will take a pin. If I'm finding it sticky, I'll just take a pin and score a little bit of a ridge into it, and then those pieces will peel off easily. Wonder Under is the product I'm most familiar with, that I've used the most. And I find that if you have just fused that onto the back of your fabric and you don't let that thoroughly cool, you're going to have difficulty pulling that paper back. So either let it cool or pop it into the freezer for 2 or 3 minutes, and it will just chill it enough to shake those molecules out of the paper. And again, with your piece that had the folded mark matched to your line that you already drew, all the pieces are going to get peeled and placed down and pressed into position. A reminder to press and not to iron and not to slide them along. So you've got your 4 pieces on, and now your strip looks like this. We've got 4 accent pieces on. The next step that she'll have you do is to just run a basting line down each edge. That's done at a specific distance. I don't think it would matter if I said what it was, but the point being, this is going to be helpful later on when we go to turn those raw edges in, and it just means that it's there and waiting for you, and it's not going to show up on your finished product. Once those pieces are the accents are on and your basting is done, this is where she puts the 2 layers of Decor Bond on the back, just in between your basting lines. All right. That little mark there is chocolate from my grandson, who was helping me the other day. And wouldn't you know it, he got chocolate on the piece I was using for my demo. Anyways, so you can see that ultimately with that guideline there, when the time comes to press these edges over, it's going to be an easy guideline. So quick review, you've got your accent pieces on, you've done your basting, you've turned it over, you've pressed your 2 layers of Decor Bond, the 2 pieces per strip, and now you are ready to do your applique stitches around the edge here. I don't have a machine that does a particularly nice blanket stitch, so I just do a satin stitch. I just do a tight zigzag altogether. I like to use rayon threads because of the luster that they have, but there's nothing stopping you from using anything you want in your machine. You can use polyesters, you can use cotton, you can use rayon, whatever you want. This is just basically holding that accent piece around and giving it a little bit of zing if you want to bling it up a little bit. The thing that you need to know about rayon is that it's made for luster. It's not made for strength. So while it is an excellent choice to do your top stitching with, it is not the choice that you're going to use to sew this object together. It doesn't have the strength for that. So for that, you want to use cotton or poly thread. By the time you have stitched around these 12 accent pieces, you will be ready to go on. It could get a little tedious if you're doing all 3 sizes at one time, but it looks really good, and it's going to help you when the time comes to squeeze those edges in to create those little bumps on the thing. Once your applique stitches are all done, your next task is going to be to turn it in on that basting line. And what I did was I just gave it a good firm pull in this area so that that basting line is either right on the edge or just coming into the other side of the work. And you give that a good steamy press. Press it from both sides. And so this is one of those times when, as you're pressing along here, you're going to get rid of that middle crease. It's not gonna show up on your finished product anyways. So you have now 3 completed pieces of the bands that go into making this project. So we'll just want to make sure that everybody, this is where you really want to have a good interpretation of the instructions and make sure that you know what you're doing. So let's start with, first of all, our band. You'll see that it's got the 4 accent pieces on, they've been stitched, our raw edges are turned in, and we're ready to start stitching this into circles. All right. So the first thing you're going to do, of course, is lay right sides together. You're going to temporarily open up those folds that you've put in place, and you're going to stitch again with cotton or poly thread because you need the strength. Don't try to do it with rayon. You're going to stitch the required seam allowance along there. Then she has the comment in her instructions, you want to be able to press that seam open. So the tool that is really handy for that, so that you're not squishing this all on the ironing board, is just some sort of little pressing roll. Some of you have seam rolls or something like that, and you can just press it open. I found it was really helpful to run my fingernail down the middle of that seam right away to begin with, and then to just press it on the little seam roll so we're not putting creases in anywhere else. And then just tuck that back. And now we have a ring, which we can turn right side out. The Decker bond is flexible enough to turn right side out without creating like creases in itself, and it'll perform properly for you. We have that task to do on 2 of those ring pieces, but the third one is left open. It's not sewn until we start building this piece together. So 2 are sewn, 1 is left flat, and now we're ready to start building it together. When you lay the ring on its side, you can see 2 accent pieces, and then there'll be a seam in this open space of main fabric. There'll be 2 accent pieces, and then there'll be another space of open fabric that was the middle of your original piece. You are going to locate a spot on the strip where 2 accent pieces come in and face each other together. You are going to just mark that for yourself with a pin, because we want that up when we go to insert the next ring. The next ring is going to go inside in here, and it's of course going to go in this direction. We're going to not just do that randomly, however, we're going to make sure that while these 2 accents are visible and on top, what's visible and on top of the ring going inside is that empty space of main fabric. I like to use the seam side because then I know I am going to make that seam disappear. All your seams will disappear by the time this is done, but we may as well get that over for this one. So I'm using that space of main fabric that the seam was run down, and I'm running it in horizontal underneath the first ring. So it's sitting inside my first ring. I'm looking at either side, the left and the right. I'm looking for those accent pieces, and I'm looking to center these accent pieces on top, just about halfway near the tip of the accent pieces on the left and the accent pieces on the right. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a perfect 90 degrees, but it just has to be in that location to make it easier for you in the end. So just stick the pin through all the layers, and that will hold it in position how it needs to be for our next step. So quick review. We had 2 of the accent pieces facing each other, so we put a pin in that skinny area in there. Then we stuck the next ring in from the side, but we wanted to make sure that the main body or the main fabric piece was more visible, and that our 2 accent pieces are coming off on the left and the right. And then using that pin, I'm attaching the 2 pieces so that this accent piece is sitting just as pretty good centered along those 2 pieces. Now we're ready to weave in the 3rd strip. And at this time, you will rotate this so that now this inner band is near your body. I'm seeing 2 accent strips, accent pieces close to my body. Because this piece that's going to go in hasn't been sewn yet, we're going to insert it with wrong side up or wrong side out, because I want to have that available to be able to make my stitches. So with these accent pieces sticking out, and this is the inner ring, I'm simply going to take this band and I'm going to set it inside that inner ring. I'm then going to pass it around the outside of the top or outer band, but inside the other side of the inner ring. So, quick review. We originally set up our rings so that our 2 accent pieces were facing each other. We slid our middle ring in. We now have these accent pieces centered over the corners of these accent pieces. I turned it. I now am weaving in my wrong side up. 3rd strip gets woven in this side of the accent strip that's facing me, around the outside of the top or outer ring, and back in underneath this one. So this is where we're going to join these up to sew. So it all feels stiff and it feels ungainly. Don't worry about it. Just push that to the side. Open up these folded edges. I recommend you definitely pin this because it'll keep it held on your throat plate, and run the required seam allowance down that piece. Again, you're going to want that to be pressed, so having a pressing tool that you can stick in the middle there and press that open will help you create a nice press on there. And when you're all done, you will have the 3 pieces woven together the way they need to be situated, but of course, they're not in position. This 3rd piece is not in the final position that it's actually going to be, so don't panic if things don't look absolutely correct at this point. So here is my size small, I think, all ready to go. I originally started with my accent pieces coming in the middle, my skinny strip there. I had this one in here, then I turned it. I wove inside the one that was closest to my body, outside, back inside, and then outside. And here's my seam that I've made. And I've pressed it and I've tucked my folded edges in. I haven't removed the pin yet because in all those manipulations, I didn't want to have to worry about those things getting displaced. But It's helping me to keep these two rings in the position that they need to be. My third ring isn't in its correct position quite yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn that right side out. It just takes a little bit of manipulating. Don't worry, your Decker bond will hold its shape just fine. And now I've got all of my pieces right side out. Back to my pin and the one it's pinned to. So you know these two that are held together don't have to be moved. It's the third one that I put in that has to be moved. So if my seam is sticking out here, and I guarantee you that no seam is showing on this finished product, then it's a matter of turning this one around inside to hide that seam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it so that this seam is going into about the middle on the other side. So I'm just going to start moving it around, shuffling it over. And when that's been achieved, look at all your accent pieces. 2 across the top. Then when I lay it like this, there's 2 across the top. Keep turning it, 2 across the top. And the same thing can happen on all 4 sides. And of course, the 5th and 6th faces of what is really now a cube of fabric. It's just a little cube of fabric. Our accent pieces are coming together. 3 accent pieces will come together to form a corner that we're going to eventually stitch together. And if we analyze the piece, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 places where 3 accent pieces have come together. So basically, this is composed and all that's left is the finishing. I'll pause here. Is there anybody that has any questions or concerns at this point? And if not, if you do, please unmute and ask your questions. And if not, then I'll just go on. Okay, so now it's a matter of creating those little indentations at each of these, all right? So remember on your original band, you had 4 places where you added an accent strip. So what we're about to do right now is bend those in place. And of course, each band had 2 places and there were 3 bands. So there are going to be 6 places where you're pinching the pieces together. So here we go. I'm going to take these 2, just kind of wiggle them till I'm happy that they're approximately in the middle. And then I'm just going to push them together. And then I'm going to turn it and I'm going to push them together. That's 2. That's 3. Oh, and I can take my pin out now because everything is in position. That's 4. So that's the 4 around here. Then that's 5. That one came out. And that is 6. So you have the basic structure ready to go. Now you're going to fine tune that. So I'm looking for the places where my accent piece intersects at the stitches right at its corner that it's folding down. And I'm trying to make my piece, shape my piece so that I can see 1, 2, 3 little accent corners coming out and being in position, because that's where I am going to sew them together. So I'm going to grab a needle and a thread. We know we have 8 places where corners are going to intersect and they have to be sewn together. I'm using a polyester thread for the strength. As I make my stitch and I run it through and it rubs by this Decker bond, I don't want cotton thread to break, and I certainly don't want rayon because it's so weak. So I've got a double thread, a knot on the end, and so I'm just reaching up underneath this accent piece, trying to get right where it sort of meets those red stitches, and I know that my knot will be hidden. And I'm just going to go over to the other side, and I don't know, I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit here. I'm catching this edge, and then I'm catching this one. So I've now passed my needle and thread through all 3 corners, and then I'll just join them up with one final stitch through the very first corner. And if you use a matching thread, either a thread that matches your decorative stitching or a thread that matches your base fabric, this will all disappear into the corners. And because I'm demonstrating, my thread gets a knot in it, because that's what has to happen. Well, fine. We'll pretend that's not even there. And then I would just tie off, and I just put my needle through just a couple of the layers. Take the thread that's coming out of the fabric, wrap it around the needle 3 or 4 times, and pull my needle through. Because it's not an item that's going to be worn, it's not going to be under the stresses that a garment would be under. Of course, that kind of knot is just going to be fine. And what I'm really going to do in real life here is tie a knot with these 2 ends. And no one will know. So that's how you're going to sew your corners together. We've just made the very points of them come together, and that has to be done 8 times. If you're going to embellish the bauble, you will want to not sew up all of the corners, but to leave a couple of the corners open and ready to take the hanging loop or the embellishment that you're going to want to put it in. And just keep shaping it and pushing them into position before you sew, and we'll have those corners meeting up and they'll come together and hold their shape. So I will show you on this one, this bauble. Maybe I'll switch back to the camera. So this bauble is hanging from this top corner, and immediately opposite, then hanging down, I made and hung a little tassel. So those 2 corners you can plan out and leave those unsewn until you're ready to put in that and capture that little tassel piece or the end of your hanger. So I'm going to switch back to dot cam now and show you how that's done. So let's say I want to put my hanger in right here. I'm going to leave those 3 corners unsewn until I'm ready to put my hanger in. For my the ones that are displaying in the store, I happen to have some rayon cord at home, and I just cut a particular length, I think it was about 12 inches, and I just did an overhand knot and made a knot at the bottom, as close as I could to the bottom. So the pressure of this knot inside on those little corner pieces is going to keep this hanger in once I sew the corners together. So don't be afraid, just open up the corner, stick the knot of the hanger in, and then you can go ahead and sew up the 3 corners all together again, just making sure that that knot is tucked inside. So even like this, that would probably hold together, but because moisture, if your room gets moist and hot, like it might at a Christmas party, your things might droop a little here. So we'll sew them together so that can't happen. So again, I've just inserted my knotted hanger. I'm catching all 3 corners and just closing them in and holding them tight together so that they wrap themselves around the knot of the hanger. And now that can be under a fair bit of pressure and it won't fall apart. Just going to knot that off. There's my hanger. You could, of course, use any ribbon you have. You could use embroidery thread. You could take a strand of 6-strand embroidery thread and knot it over and tuck the knot inside at the top, and it would still function to be the hanger for your bauble. You can tell on this one, I just used a piece of flat gray colored ribbon and my rayon, and yeah, so that works for these. For embellishing the bottom, if you want, by the way, you can, the designer talks about ways you can use these. And of course, they can just be unembellished and just laying in a bowl and fun to play with. But you can make them into hanging decorations that have some embellishment. The small size in particular, I think would be quite okay to put on a Christmas tree. And it would be an appropriate size and not too heavy. So to put a little tassel on the bottom, you could purchase a tassel. This is just a purchased little metallic silver tassel. I used the thread that was around the top of the tassel, and I tucked it in there and then stitched it in place so that it can't move. But you can also make yourself a little tassel. For this Halloween bauble, I wanted something to hang down, and I wanted to have these little orange 1/8 inch, maybe, yeah, 1/8 inch ribbon tassels hanging out. So I just handmade a tassel, and I'll just show you that quickly. My tassel form is just a piece of cereal box cardboard, and I made it as long as I wanted my tassel, plus an extra 3/4 of an inch or so, just so that I could make the knot on the top of the tassel. I didn't want to cut the end of my tassels. I wanted all of my ribbons to have a loop at the bottom. So when I go to string my ribbon around my piece of cardboard, I'm going to start my open end of the tassel at the top, and I'm going to start and finish at the top of my cardboard piece. So you're just wrapping that ribbon around your piece of cardboard as many times as you want. I don't know how many times I did that, but we'll give it a few more. And by cutting the cardboard template, then all 3 of my Halloween baubles can have a tassel that's the same size, or I can cut different sizes, whatever I want. So let's say that's the size or the number of times I want to turn that around the cardboard. Here's my beginning of my ribbon, and here's the end. And I want that at the top so that I can hide that inside the bauble when I'm done. In order to tie this at the top and just to keep it held tight, I'm just taking a little bit of 12-weight thread here, and I'm going to, this is just a 12-weight embroidery thread that I just happen to have, and I'm going to cut a piece about 10 to 12 inches long. And I want to be able to make the knot that binds the top of this without going to a lot of trouble, without having to go to a lot of work to do it. So I have my template with my ribbon wound around it, and I have my piece of sturdy 12-weight cotton. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay that 12-weight cotton so that most of the length of the piece is to my right. I am a right-handed person. If you were left-handed, you'd do this the opposite. And then I'm just making a little fold in the top, a little loop in the top, that's going to become how I'm going to make the knot on this. And I'm ready to make my tassel. So I'm going to slide my loops of ribbon off my template gently and just gather them together in my hand. So now to do this knot, I'm going to lay this loop just alongside my ribbon pieces, and I'm going to grab it so that it can't go anywhere. And here's my long end coming out of my piece, and here's my short end. You don't want to lose track of that little short end. So I'm ready to wind my long end around my ribbon pieces. Tucked up under in here in my hand is this little loop of embroidery thread. You can, or the 12 weight thread. You can, nope, you can't see it. There it is. It's still there. So I'm holding it and I am winding that long piece around, and I'm just keeping it nice and tight. And I use 12 weight because I know it won't break in my fingers when I'm doing this. So this is definitely not a job for rayon. I'm using cotton. All right, I've wound it around. My tassel is held pretty tight at its neck. Now I'm looking to put the end of the piece that I was winding through that loop of cotton that I left at the top. So I'm simply putting it through the loop, just like threading the eye of a needle. Now I'm going to find the short end of that loop that was left. Just gonna make sure you can see that. So you can see I've put the end that I was winding through the loop in my thread that I made originally and held at the top. And this was the end of that loop. Now I'm pulling on it. And as I pull on it, that loop will tighten down in and it will pull the rest of my winding thread. Whoops, sorry. There we go. It will pull it just under this collar of twists that I've made. And I don't have to go very far. I just have to pull it so that it lays tight to these little twists. And now that's going to hold. I'm not going to have to worry about that coming apart. So this was the piece left over from sending it through the loop. I'll just cut it off nice and short so it doesn't get in my way. And this is the strand that where are you? There we go. This is the strand that I pulled to lock it into position. And so I can trim that off and get it out of the way. And now I just have a little bound piece of ribbon that I can use as a tassel. If I wanted to put it in this bauble, I just find my open spot, because I did open one. There we go. So there's the one corner area that I left open. I'm just going to insert all of that up to the knot into that open area. And there's my tassel sitting in there, and it's ready to stitch into position and to lock it into position. So I'll just switch to the video camera here and show you that that's sticking out of the bottom of it, and it'll just be stitched in place. And so then the exact opposite is the place where I would put the hanger and let that hang down. So that's one made out of ribbon. If you don't have ribbon and you want to make a tassel out of a matching thread, you can go to the craft store and you can get, DMC has a product that is made out of rayon, and it would match in shininess. Thanks, Lisa. She got that focused for me. It would match in shininess the rayon cord that I've used and the rayon thread that I used for the applique. So I made a much smaller tassel form for this one. And again, you're just going to wrap that thread. But this time, because I want to make a tassel that can hang from my the bauble and that is locked around the top and is going to be cut open at the bottom, I'm going to start and end with my open end pieces at the bottom. So it's really the only difference. And I'm going to tie this one a little more effectively. Before I begin, I'm going to cut myself a couple of pieces. One is going to be the tie. So I have that ready to go and I don't have to hold things and stop and get ready and cut that. And one is going to be the band that binds the tassel all together. So however many turns you want to take around your cardboard shape, and you've just cut a piece of cereal cardboard, however long you want that tassel to be. This way you can, if you can find the appropriate color of rayon cord or of rayon embroidery thread, you can match it to a few more colors than tassels might be available in the store. I began at the bottom with the open end of the tassel, and I will end at the bottom with the open end of the tassel. One of those pieces I cut is going to be what ties this tassel together at the top. Oh, rayon, you're a little bit jumpy there. So I'm going to pass this tie underneath all of my strands of rayon, and I'm going to tie a knot in it. And I'm sorry, I have to cover that with my hand. I did this with cotton earlier and it behaved itself beautifully. This rayon wants to jump all over the place. So what I've essentially done is tied all of my loops that were put around here together at the top, and I've made a knot. And I think I'm going to make another one because this rayon is super slippery. Then I'm ready to slide it off the cardboard shape. This rayon may have little bends and folds in it from sitting on the skein, etc. All of those will come out if you just dangle this over a steamy kettle. So that's not going to be a problem at all. But I do want to tie my tassel. So I'm going to perform the same trick that I did before. I'm going to make my tie lay flat with a loop at the top, a short end that I'm going to pull on later to knot it, and a long end that is going to be my pulling piece. I'm going to lay that loop at the top of my tassel. You'll know it's the one that's going to be the knot because it's not tied inside with the rest of the hanging. And I'm taking that long end and wrapping it around and really binding that tight. I'm going to send that strand that's winding around through that loop. And then I'm going to pull on that short end. I hope it's this one. Bringing that, no, it is not that one. Well, fail. Epic fail. Let's see, where are you? Should have marked it. Should have put a little knot on the end of it. There it is. And again, pulling on it, you can't see this, but it's pulling, that loop is pulling that tied end down to the point where it's going to tighten itself down. I'm going to show this cotton one. really tightly around. The cotton yarn has cohesion to itself, so it doesn't want to just slip away. So what did I just learn? I just learned rayon is a nasty one to make tassels out of. I pulled it down. I pull that loop down until it just tucks it inside the top edge of all of these bands, and then you can cut that off and your tassel will behave itself. So we just learned that cotton is going to make an easier to make tassel than rayon. And this one, just let the pressure off just for a second and you can see how loose it became. So much for my rayon idea. But it would be pretty because it would be all shiny, but nevertheless. So a couple of embellishment ideas. You can also, if you wanted to, you can make little bows to go around your hanger or make little loops of ribbon at the bottom of your purchased tassels or whatever. I just want to make sure that I have done everything that I wanted to do. The only thing that's left is if you wanted to make these out of pieces of fabric that you have from your own stash. The original pattern asks, for example, if you're making the size large, you need a fat quarter of your main fabric and you need a 12 by 20 inch piece of your accent fabric. I just made these out of a new fabric and I just took measurements as I cut them out and how much they needed. So the large one needed a 9-inch by width of fabric piece for the main and a 4-inch by width of fabric for the accent. The medium one needed a 4-inch by width of fabric for the main and a 4-inch piece for the accent. And the small needs a 4-inch piece for the main and a 2-inch piece for the accent. And all of these are just by width of fabric. So you can buy new fabric and use little pieces like that if you are heading that way instead of just having fat quarters. So, yeah, I told you I can talk forever and ever. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them now. I'm just going to look at gallery view and make sure that those that are watching, is it making sense? And you can nod or wave that it's all good. So no, any questions or concerns? When those patterns come in, we'll get them out in the mail to you as quickly as possible, and you can get going on making your baubles.
Thank you, Deborah.
Well, thank you, everybody, for signing on.
That was excellent.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm really
Excellent.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you guys are willing to try this with Zoom. It's just a way of getting that information out there, and it's kind of fun to prep for it and do it. It's
excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was very well
tutorial.
Deborah,
Someone have a question?
It's me, Sharon.
Okay, Sharon.
I had a repairman standing in my kitchen, which you might have seen when you were doing the part that I needed to see. The accent pieces, when you the pattern says just to adhere the top part.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, Sharon. I forgot about that. It was one thing. I have no idea why she says that. That was a stymie for me too when I first did this pattern. So people what Sharon is referring to is on the pattern in step 3, she's talking about applying those accent pieces to the main piece. And she says, fold the appliques and make that little crease and join them up and match them up with the marking that you've made. And then it says, fuse accent applique in place on the curved edges only. Well, how can you do that if the very next thing you're going to do is press the side edges up and fuse, like turn them under and press them in place? So yes, that made me pause when I first made these. I have no idea why that's there. Maybe she was allowing it so that you could not have it adhered, like so that it wouldn't draw up the piece when you turn those edges under. And then once they were turned, then, that little applique piece could slide up, the 1/16 of an inch that it needs or whatever. I have to tell you, I plunked those down with the iron and fused the whole thing in place and had no trouble. I had no issues with that whatsoever. Thanks for that, Sharon. Yeah, I meant to mention that.
And the two pieces of interfacing, the Decker bond, you just layer them on the fabric?
Yep, exactly. One right on top of the other. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Deborah,
Yes.
when you were doing it, you pushed the accent pieces in first and then you stitched the corners together, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, but the pattern says to do it the opposite.
Oh, either way, the reason I pushed the accent corners in first was I wanted to know that I had my shape setting up properly and that they were sort of balanced with each other, that they were sort of sitting and balanced each other. Absolutely, you could sew it together first.
When I sewed it together first, I couldn't push the accent pieces in. I couldn't get them to stay in.
I'm thinking that you're setting yourself up for, just depending how far in from those edges of those pieces when you sew. But when the accent pieces are in, then they're already in position and they're already folded, right? So I'm almost sewing through folds rather than maybe it just created a situation where you were too far in from the very corner point of the accent piece. So,
I wonder if that's what happened. Yeah. Okay, that's actually the actual answer I needed for this, because I now have to undo all my stitching and push the accent pieces in and restitch it.
Yep, push them in. Don't worry about being able to manipulate those into position for sewing the corners. I just find it's really helpful to have them sitting the way they're going to look when I go to do those actual stitches.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Deborah,
Yes.
I was just wondering, what is it you used on look like the half moons? What was it that you used on the back of them?
Oh, I use Wonder Under.
Wonder Under, and then you use the Deca Bond on the others.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And you said this is going to be on YouTube?
Yeah. We're down to a minute, ladies. I don't know if this just turns itself off automatically at 8 o'clock, but yes, they'll edit this video and it'll come on YouTube eventually.
Will it be on YouTube for a while so we can follow once we get our patterns?
Yeah, you'll get a link to it, Peggy, and it'll be for a long time. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great night,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.